Good day. This is Richard Lowe. I'm with the Writing King, and I'm here with Bonnie Dillabough. She is an author. She's just about to publish her 7th book, and we met a long time ago. So before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what I do. I am a ghostwriter, and you can contact me on the Writing King, and I'm also a book coach. So if you need help with either one of those things, see me. Now, let's get on to Bonnie. Bonnie, how are you doing today?
Oh, you know what? It's great. I'm really excited to be back online with you with your renewal of this the AuthorTalk, because it's always been so inspiring for me.
Yes, yes. I remember we started this together about 4 years ago, and we did 25 episodes, and I'm restarting it, and you're the first one. I've got some 30 authors scheduled now.
That's awesome.
Yes. So tell me how you got into the writing field.
Well, really, it's funny that this is full circle for me, because I started wanting to write a book when I was like 16 years old. I didn't publish the first book until 2 weeks before my 64th birthday. That being said, there were a few other things going on in my life. But I got to a point to where my life was changing drastically because I was going to be in a wheelchair. And in the meantime, I ran into this guy called the Writing King of all things. We started hanging out together. I had been marketing online and making my living that way for many, many years. And I was at the time teaching some marketing classes and this, that, and the other. And through that, I got hooked up with Richard Lowe, which was a good turning point in my life, because one of the things that I started doing for him was helping him edit his AuthorTalk videos, which, you know, I had 15 years in broadcast television, so I had a little bit of experience in that sort of thing. So, you know, we were exchanging some different helps with one another. At any rate, the thing is at that point, I was kind of like feeling a little lost about what could I do, because I was having some health issues and one thing and another. My kids were all grown and gone away, and I was more or less in retirement. And what was I going to do? And I started editing these videos of him talking to all these different authors. And the more I listened, the more I kept going, you know, I think I could maybe write a book. Maybe that's what I need to do. I've always wanted to do that. And then you gave me the opportunity, because I mentioned that I'd like to do it, to interview an amazing author, Mercedes S. Lackey. And I'm going, oh, Richard, I'd love to interview her, but she's not going to talk to me. I'm a nobody. And you said, well, you know, what can it hurt to ask? The worst you could do is say no. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's true. So I asked, and guess what? She said yes. And I did an interview with her. It's about 30 minutes. And she was delightful. And it was a total fangirl moment for me, because I'd read most of her books. She's written over 140 in her author career. And so I'm like, oh, wow, this is so cool. We turned the recording off, and she talked to me for another 45 minutes. What a generous giving of her time to somebody who's, like I said, at that time, just pretty much a nobody. And finally, I very shyly said, you know, I've been thinking about writing a book. And she leaned up into the camera just like this. And she said, so put your butt in the chair and write. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so that was the beginning. And then you steered me to this beautiful thing called NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writers Month, where it's a 50,000 word challenge to write 50,000 words in a month. I took that challenge. By the time I was done with that, I had 78,000 words. This is the end of November. And I'm like, you know, I got about half a book here. Maybe I should keep going. And so I did. And long story short, yeah, I know, too late. But the point is I I finished the book on January 1st. So I started the new year with a finished manuscript. Now the fun began because I had to figure out editing and whatnot. And but I did end up publishing that book in April, 2 weeks before my 64th birthday, which is, I mean, I just turned 69. So that gives you an idea of the time span. And was introduced into the publishing world at that point. And it's all your fault, Richard.
I know, I take full responsibility. Shame on me. Yeah, I remember all of that. That was fun times.
It was
coloring books, and then worked our way toward books, and then you became an author. I was becoming an author, and I've published over 120 books now, both ghostwritten and non-ghostwritten. So we've had quite an amazing journey.
Yeah, it's been fun. And here's the thing that I know about all of this is it's interesting how the different connections in our life make such a difference. And I think one of the things that your listeners will get and viewers will get out of this show is two things, I think. Number one, that writing and authoring is a very accessible thing in so many ways. And there's so many different approaches as to how to become an author and to be published. But also that there are things you need to know. There's so much that I did not know when I got started. And over time, the experiences I've had have taught me a lot. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I like to do, strictly volunteer, is to mentor aspiring authors. I don't write copy for them. I don't edit for them or anything like that. I just help them get over the bumps in the publishing process, because it would have saved me so much time, blood, sweat, tears, and money if I'd have known more about it from the beginning. So I learned to connect myself to other authors. One of my favorite sayings when I talk to authors is, no author is an island, nor should they be. You can't write in a vacuum. There are so many different ways that you can get the help you need. One is a writing coach, someone who can take you through your path as far as writing and publishing your book is concerned. Let's say that you've got a really great story, or for instance, I know that you do for a lot of businesses, they don't have the time to write a book, but a book that has information about that particular business or trade or whatever can be so helpful in their promotions, in their outreach to clients, and all these different kinds of things. It's a valuable tool to have as a business. As on a personal level for fiction and whatnot, I know that you've also helped a number of people make some really impressive fiction books. And I think it's really important, right, starting out from the beginning, to realize that although your story's in your head, and yes, you're sitting at the keyboard, tippity tapping away, or a lot of people do it longhand still these days. Either way, having someone that you can bounce off of or learn from can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I know. As you mentioned before, I do writing coaching, and I do exactly that. I take a person from an author from A to Z, and from wherever they're at. So if they're having trouble with marketing, I help them with that. If they're having trouble with books, I help them with that. If they're having trouble writing, I help them with that. Whatever it is, and I put together a customized plan, and then we go through it from beginning to end.
And see, that's just it. We can do so much more together than we can individually. And so whether, regardless of where you are in your authoring journey, I have to say, I love writing, but I used to hate editing. I've since learned that I think if I call it editing, I still hate it. But if I call it crafting my story, I've learned to recognize that that's a really important part of the writing process. So in your writing journey, you need help with various things, and it's going to be different from person to person. Maybe even somebody who is a professional copy editor. I know professional copy editors who have other people edit their books for them. Okay. So even if you are professional and you think you know your stuff, there's so much more to it. You need a cover artist. You need a copy editor. You need to know the publishing industry. And if you don't, having somebody who can walk you through those steps can be very important, save you a lot of time and money and frustration. So I'm saying writing is fun. I mean, I write science fiction fantasy, okay? I call it pretending on paper. I don't have to grow up. I can just go out there and pretend all I want, write all these crazy stories and whatnot. And, but here's what's really fun about it, is now that I've got 6 books under my belt, I have fans. And it's not about being popular or famous or anything like that. It's about people who come up to you in the grocery store and say, when's your next book coming out? That is so exciting to me, that people actually enjoy my stories as much as I enjoyed writing them. And I think it's worth every bit that I had to go through to get to the point to where those stories are out there. Now it's going to be a 9-book series. What happens after that, I have absolutely no clue. Everybody keeps asking me. I'm not sure yet. But I have 6 books out. I'm over halfway through book 7, and it's going to be published in November. And I've been publishing these books about every 6 months. So that's kind of where I'm at right now as far as writing and publishing is concerned. And I think that people who watch this show can learn a lot about how to do what they need to do to get started as a writer, or if they've already got something started, how to get it finished, because finishing sometimes is the 2 hardest parts are starting it and actually starting it and finishing it. And if you can get those 2 things done, the rest of the stuff kind of works itself out eventually.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Finishing is, starting's hard and finishing is hard. Like I said, I'm a ghostwriter, and I just had a call from a client, and it's a first draft. So he was like, he wants a lot of changes. And that's totally normal. And that's the interesting thing. The difference between what you're doing and what I'm doing is I'm writing for somebody else. And I always have to prep them that first draft is rough draft, because it can be a shock. It's not what I want, but that's fine. It's not supposed to be what you want. It's the path. It's on the path, and this is all about the journey of writing.
Right. It is.
You start, you write, then you finish, and then you go back and you edit, and then possibly you throw it away and start over if you need to, whatever. And then you write some more, and then you write some more, and then you get some beta readers to come in and read it, and then eventually you get a final edit, and that's usually hard because you want to edit some more, but you have to just put a cap on it and say, okay, we're done. And then you start the fun stuff, the promotion. Usually I recommend promoting it when you start. Right. The book while you're writing the book.
Absolutely, I agree.
Because otherwise you're coming up from zero. And then you gotta get a book cover and post. We're talking self-publishing and self-published. I've had 3 authors is my clients, who've actually been traditionally published and sold thousands and thousands and thousands of copies. So not an amateur at this.
Right.
And it can be fun. It's fun as in the sarcastic sense of fun.
Right. And I think too, I mean, you say traditionally published, there are so many options for publishing now that we never had before. And so traditionally published can be a long drawn out process, but it can be very rewarding depending on who the publisher is and that sort of thing. But there's also the self-publishing route. the thing with self-publishing that you need to recognize is that there's kind of a stigma out there about self-published books. But what I'm finding is that more and more libraries and bookstores are accepting independently published books as long as you do it the right way. And so I'm currently, I've already got, for my next book coming out, that's coming out in November, I already have a book signing booked with our local Barnes and Noble bookstore because they're selling so many of my books. So
very interesting.
So self-publishing can work out well if you do it right. And that's probably one of the important things for people to know is there's things that you need to learn if you're going to be independently published. But I'll give you a little secret. Even if you're being traditionally published, you need to know and understand a little bit about the publishing industry, because even traditional publishers aren't going to give you a free ride on marketing and promotion and all that. You've got to learn to do that yourself. And,
right.
And authors have a tendency to be a little introverted.
No way.
One of the reasons that writing is so good for them is it's a way for them to communicate without having to talk to somebody.
I know that for a fact.
And so that being said, there's some skills that you need to learn. There's also some alternatives that you need to learn about ways to promote yourself without having to be an outgoing extrovertish person. I personally am fairly extroverted, but the thing that most people don't realize is they see me on the surface as being this really outgoing, extroverted person. What they don't know is how much effort I have to put into actually doing that, because I spend so much time in my head. It's not that I'm afraid to talk to people. It's just I don't always have time to talk to anybody because I've got so much going on. So I think that probably one of the benefits to this particular podcast is to be able to see, first of all, that there are a lot of that authors come in all shapes, sizes, ages, etc. And their journeys are all similar but different. And by learning what other authors are going through and how they deal with things and their outlooks on writing and all the things that go along with that, it's encouraging to know that you don't have to be set in a certain cookie cutter mold to be a successful published author. And one of the, for instance, we separate ourselves into genres. There's genres and then there's types of books too, young adult, middle grade, or, everything from erotica down to, self-help books, whatever. There's all these different types and all these different genres of books. And you need to kind of know where you are in that spectrum so that you can find out who are your readers and all of this. And a good book coach can guide you in that direction. Also, there's some great writers groups out there that are very helpful. One of the things that I would suggest that people avoid are what they call critique groups. Oftentimes they meet at libraries, that sort of thing, for writers. There's a difference between a critique group and a critic group. And unfortunately, a lot of critique groups fall into that category of critics, and they spend more time tearing your stuff apart than telling you what's good and what's working in your story. So be careful of that. There are some good ones out there, but you need to be discerning, and don't feel like just because you came once, if you didn't like it, if it didn't feel right to you, you don't have to keep going to that group. And you don't have to take, also beta readers. Love them, love them, love them. They have their opinions about how things should be. You don't have to accept everything that they tell you that needs to be done to your book, because they're not always right. So and those are just little things that I've learned in the process. But once again, it's not shutting yourself away in your nice, cozy little attic and waiting for the muse to light on your shoulder to whisper in your ear about what you should write. And then you put that book out there and everybody goes, oh, it's wonderful. And now all of a sudden you're J.K. Rowling and signing billion-dollar contracts and stuff like that. It just doesn't really work that way.
No, I wish it did, but it doesn't.
Well, even for J.K. Rowling, it didn't.
I know, she had a hard path.
Well, but she's a brilliant, intuitive marketer. I don't always agree with everything she says, but her books are awesome, and she knows from her own personal experiences how to get people's attention, not only about her books, but then she's expanded it out to be so much more than that. But you've got to start someplace. And you can look at somebody like that, or Stephen King or Brandon Sanderson, and go, oh man, I could never be that. Forget about that. Right? Get your story out there. Tell your story. And then the other stuff will either fall into place or it won't. But you know what? Writing is really good therapy. That's the other thing that I've found. So it's cheaper than a therapist. So
yeah, there's actually a few ghostwriting projects where I've had to tell the client, I'm not your therapist, I'm your writer. So let's back off a little bit.
Right. Yeah. So
it happens.
Richard, one of the questions, I talk to people about you all the time, and one of the questions that I often get is, if I'm a fiction writer, how do I get somebody else to write my story? I don't understand how that happens.
Well, it's just ghostwriting, and by that I mean I work with somebody from the beginning, and I've spent a lot of time going through what the story is from them, the outline, the things like that. We work together on it most of the time, so we'll spend a lot of time on Zoom. Usually on Zoom. I've got one client now who's actually local. He lives 2 miles away, which is very weird. But because now we're meeting locally, and you know, we just got out of COVID, and it's kind of strange. Basically, I work with the client enough where I sort of kind of play them and be them for a while. But it's tough, especially fiction. Fiction is where the pedal meets the metal. I mean, technology and stuff. Most of my books tend to be technology related or franchise related or something. Those are relatively easy because I just have to figure out what they want to say and then say it in a certain way. And I had one client who says he wants me to curse more in the book. It's quite funny because usually I don't. Funny. Yeah, because he says I curse sometimes. I don't curse a lot, but sometimes, you know, I want you to say down and a few other things. And then I've had other clients who say don't. But so that's nonfiction. But in the fiction, it can get interesting. I had one book where we spent 5 months basically on the phone 3 hours a week, going on the Zoom 3 hours a week, going through the plot point by point until we had a plot. And then we started writing. And even then we were working out plot and stuff. But he got a book he wanted, and it turned out pretty good. Science fiction. Mm-hmm. And I have a goal, changing the subject slightly, I have a goal of doing one book in each of 12 different genres before I die. So I want to do a romance, I want to do Western, I want to do this, but they're all going to be interconnected in some way. Fun. Yeah, so paranormal and stuff. So there'll be some commonality of characters and things. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. Still working it out in my head.
I like concept. That sounds like fun.
Don't let anybody steal it now, but so, it's going to be fun.
Actually, I know a couple of people who are multi-genre authors and are actually quite good at it. Personally, when I had to choose between science fiction and fantasy, I decided to interweave them both. And so I do sci-fi fantasy. There are robots and dragons in my books. I use science fiction to explain some of the fantasy stuff and whatnot. Well, I mean, it's based on just something that I've noticed is, have you ever noticed that in every culture on the planet, every culture has some kind of a mythology or legends about dragons?
Sure.
They're often described somewhat differently, but it's the same creature. And that was kind of one of the things that fascinated me. And also elves, dwarves, fairies, all of those kinds of things, or those type of creatures are intermixed throughout cultures all over the world. So why is that? And so part of the science fiction of my books actually explores the origins of some of the fantasies that we have on Earth, which has kind of been fun for me. But you know, that's one concept.
Yeah,
right?
Larry Niven wrote the End of the Magic. I think it's called The End of Magic. Does the same thing. And Fred Saberhagen wrote The Empire of the East,
right?
Which is the same thing. It has magic mixed with science, and that one's very interesting.
One of my characters is often says that magic is only science we don't understand yet.
Arthur C. Clarke.
Yes, he's the one who originated that in his 3 principles of
that's
science.
Asimov.
Was that Asimov?
Asimov's The 3 Laws of Robotics.
No, that's the 3 Laws of Robotics. Clarke had the 3 rules of science. It's fascinating, but at any rate, yes, Asimov did have the 3 Laws of Robotics, and but the point being that point of view is really, really important.
Right.
And you can have the exact same topic. Oh, we did this at a workshop. It was really fun. They called out a bunch of things, categories on the board, things, types of people, places, and tools, and there were like 5 things on the board that they put, and then they made columns, and we got to call out different things that went into each of those columns. And then they said, okay, you have 5 minutes, pick one thing out of each of these columns in any mixture you want and write a story. You have 5 minutes, go. You would not believe the differences in the stories that came out of that little exercise. There was science fiction, there was fantasy, there were crime, there was all these romance and all this different stuff. And I'm just going, wow. So when somebody says, oh, somebody's going to steal my story, no, probably not. It's a lot of work.
I've been working my way through this.
Oh.
Book. It's called Right Brain, and it has 400 exercises in it that they can be pretty hairy. And it teaches you different ways to write. Write characters that do this, and they're short exercises. Sometimes they can be pretty tough, even though you're only supposed to write 200 words or something. I like that.
So, Right Brain exercises, is that what it's called?
The Right Brain Workbook. Right
Brain Workbook. I'm going to have to check that out. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
So, at any rate, I am so excited that you're starting this series up again. And I think that each one of your authors is going to have a little bit of something to say and whatnot. I would like to give a challenge with a reward to your viewers and listeners. Shall we do that?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, so here's the thing. I would really like to see this podcast succeed, and I think you can already see that in future there will be some really cool things. I know you've got a great lineup of authors already waiting in line to do this podcast, but I want to challenge all the viewers. I've written this sci-fi fantasy series. I will give away the first 2 ebooks in this 9-book series to anyone who puts a comment, be nice now, a comment in the comment area about this program Maybe it will be something you'd like to see in future, a particular author that you'd like to recommend for this podcast, or something you learned from this podcast today, or a question you have for either Richard or me, anything like that. You put a comment down there, you're automatically going to qualify for 2 of my first 2 ebooks in this series, absolutely no charge and no strings attached.
She'll get your emails from the comments, and then she can send them to you.
Yep. Because this is going to be such a wonderful ride for all of us. I will be watching and commenting on a regular basis myself. And so I'm going to suggest to you that maybe in future, if you're an aspiring author, or you are an author and you're just looking for new tips and tricks and how to do this, that, or the other thing, or you just like books, maybe next time sit down with your notepad and take some notes, because there's going to be some really interesting and fun things. And in the meantime, let me also say this. I've known Richard, as we said, for quite a while. And one of the things I know about him is he's extremely diligent in doing what he does for people. He really cares. We talk frequently about various projects privately, and he doesn't give me any names, okay? But when he's working on various projects, I can tell how sincere he is about giving you, the client, everything that you want, and doing the best possible job for you. He's got some great books already out there. Obviously, he's a ghostwriter. His name doesn't go on most of those books, but I just want you to know that Richard really has his act together, where writing and coaching are concerned. And he's 100% about making sure that the client has what they need. So he didn't know that I was going to give him that little plug here towards the end, but I honestly am very, very impressed with where he has taken his career. I've been watching him for a long time, and the sincerity of what he's putting into this is just so impressive. And I'm so excited to see that he's doing this podcast again, because I think people are going to get a lot out of it. Thank you, Richard, so much for giving me the opportunity to help
you, Bonnie,
start this out.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on the show. We've done a lot of podcasts and things together in the past. This was a good one to restart with. So I'm the Writing King. You can go to my site, thewritingking.com. And I've got several hundred blog articles about how to write fiction and ghostwriting and any number of other subjects, LinkedIn and so forth. I do LinkedIn profiles. If you have a link, if you want to stand out on LinkedIn. I also do books for people, and they could be anything from a children's book all the way through a book on technology. In fact, one of the books I wrote was a children's book about technology. I could also, I also do writing coaching. So if you need help with the book at any phase, we'll have a free conversation for about half an hour to an hour, where I'll get your whatever problem you're having or problems, and I'll put together a one-on-one plan that we'll go through over the next weeks or months to resolve that problem or help you with that problem. Anyway, Bonnie, thanks for appearing on the show.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, I didn't even bother to mention, but my book series is called The Dimensional Alliance. Mm-hmm. And the first book of the series is The House on Infinity Loop. And it's Bonnie K. T. Dillabough. Thank you very much once again, Richard, for letting me be on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you. And thank you all. Be ready for the next episode.